For the last decade or so, it seemed like everyone and their grandma wanted to learn to code and be a software engineer. The career seemed to offer great pay, good working conditions, and the ability to work at the forefront of some cutting-edge technology. But like any other career, it comes with its own set of drawbacks. So in this video, I want to go over what I feel like are the biggest downsides of being a software engineer that you should know before entering the field, and also how I would personally deal with these. The first thing that you should know as we enter 2025 is that the field is a lot more competitive than it used to be. The job market for software developers today is simply not the gold rush it was back in 2021. Back then, I was getting DMs and messages on LinkedIn from recruiters on a daily basis asking me to join their team. I used to mentor at a coding bootcamp back in 2021, and I saw with my own eyes nearly every successful graduate land a solid developer job within a few months of graduating. And I really recommended going to a coding bootcamp. There were a lot of people that literally went from making minimum wage to making six figures within just a few months. Today, that's not really the case anymore, and even people that have graduated with computer science degree are having a hard time finding their first job. And if you've graduated from a coding bootcamp, you are competing against those people. It's due to a bunch of different reasons, from offshoring to high interest rates to just overhiring right after the pandemic. But the job market today is a lot more competitive, especially for juniors. So today, even a computer science degree alone is no longer a guarantee of a stable career, and there's the constant threat of layoffs that looms over every employee. For as long as I can remember, all I would ever see on Reddit or in the news was about the shortage of tech workers and their $300,000 salaries right out of school. The way that we talk about the shortage of nurses today reminds me of the way we talked about the shortage of software engineers and other tech workers back in 2021. So if you're considering software engineering as a career, just keep in mind that your job hunting experience is going to differ a lot from someone who was looking for a job 3 or 4 years ago. It'll probably take quite a bit longer, and it will be a more tedious process. So don't compare yourself, and understand that it's probably the job market, it's not you. And before you immediately invest in a coding bootcamp or a 4-year degree in computer science, just maybe take some time and really reflect on whether or not you have the motivation and the passion for problem solving that's going to sustain you through some of these harder times. And this brings me to my next point. The interview process for a software development job has always been pretty challenging and nerve-wracking, especially at a big tech company. I've actually gone through a few rounds of interviews over the past year or so myself, just to see what it's like out there, and I can tell you from personal experience that it's definitely gotten a lot harder. In the past, I would get an interview request even if I only met 60% of the job requirements listed on a posting. But today, I've noticed that I really have to meet a lot more of those requirements because employers have the luxury of cherry picking exactly the person that matches their ideal candidate. I see a lot of posts on LinkedIn criticizing how software interviews these days have completely diverged from the day-to-day reality of the job. You might be asked a coding challenge like remove duplicates from a linked list or to trap rainwater or something during the interview, but your day-to-day job actually consists of just changing font colors in a form. And I can understand how frustrating this is, especially since, like me, it's been years since you've been in an algorithms class and you've completely forgotten how to solve a lot of these tricky LeetCode style questions. Speaking of interviews, I was recently conducting a mock interview for my friend who was using Python, and I realized I needed to brush up on my Python syntax quickly. If you're preparing for your coding interviews, I do recommend Python because it's very concise, so you're not wasting time typing out all of this boilerplate code. I came across this free Python introductory resource from HubSpot that is easy to understand and accessible to even those who are really new to programming. Essentially, it's a brief overview of Python and programming, covering how to set it up, get started, along with what it's best used for and common methods and functions. Now, what helped me specifically was the chapter on advanced Python, which gets into the key features like list methods, tuples, and the range function, which gave me a quick rundown of useful syntax for the mock interview. If you need an all-in-one resource to to either gain an understanding of Python and programming or just to brush up on it, I highly recommend checking out the free resource by clicking on the link in the description below. I found it really easy to understand and accessible, and I'm hoping you will have the chance to check it out as well. Thank you, HubSpot, for creating this free resource for developers and for being the sponsor of this video. Typically, the process consists of at least one phone screen, a technical interview, a behavioral interview, maybe a take-home project, and another meet the team sort of interview. So it can be a very long, drawn-out process. And on top of that, if you want to work at a big tech company, one of the FANG companies, you might need to even spend 3 to 6 months just studying for those technical exams. My software engineering friends who are looking for new jobs these days are all spending a few hours each day, 3 to 6 months, doing leak code questions before they're applying to these companies. The fact that you might need to spend a few months brushing up on your technical skills before you feel ready to interview is a big downside of this career, and it might be a really depressing idea, but that might not always be the case. The good news is not every company asks these leak code style questions, especially if you are going for front-end web developer roles. Second, if you're willing to spend half an hour a day, a few times a week, you might be able to maintain a baseline level of interview skills. From personal experience, maintaining a skill is far easier than learning it the first time. So while you might need to make that initial 3 to 6 month investment to either grind leak code or learn how to pass the technical interviews, if you're willing to invest an hour or so every week to maintain that knowledge, you might never need to do it again. In today's economy, there's no such thing as job loyalty and no job is safe. So in my opinion, one of the best ways to protect yourself is always be in a state where you're ready to tackle these technical interviews and you are constantly going out and getting practice interviewing so you don't get stale. At every company I've ever worked at, people have been asking engineers for estimates on how long a project will take. But if you think about it, the only way we can give an accurate estimate of a feature or a project is if we're building something extremely simple or building the exact same thing under the same conditions. But in my personal experience, that's rarely been the case. The nature of software engineering is building something custom that we haven't really done before, or we're doing it under different conditions. And so our estimates have always been consistently inaccurate. DHH said recently that the fundamental problem is that as soon as a type of software development becomes so routine that it would be possible to estimate, it turns into a product or a service that you can just buy rather than build. To combat this issue, a lot of the times our team would just resort to slightly overestimating how long something would take, just so that we can ensure that we can deliver on time. And honestly, that's not the best solution either, because there's still going to be times where we run into a big obstacle we didn't foresee coming, or we realize halfway through that our initial approach was completely wrong. In those cases, I would be really stressed out working nights and weekends to try to meet the estimate that I'd set out for myself. These days, I am a lot more comfortable communicating these unexpected blockers, but it's definitely easier said than done, especially when I was a junior or when I felt a lot of imposter syndrome. Good engineering teams and managers will usually be understanding if you communicate early and often when you think something will take longer than you initially thought. But the most important thing here is transparency. And if you are transparent early on and over communicate, then your team should still maintain their trust in you. Imagine it's 3 a.m. and an alarm goes off for one of the services your engineering team is responsible for. You stumble out of bed and open your laptop. You look at the error logs, but you have no idea where to even begin because you are tired, it's the middle of the night, and the problem is coming from a code base you never even touched. Welcome to on-call duty. Being part of an on-call rotation is arguably one of the biggest downsides of working as a software developer, and I've seen engineering teams teeter on the brink of burnout because of this. You can't fully relax after work because you're just thinking about being on call. You're carrying this mental load of knowing that, you might be pinged at any moment, and you might as well kiss your weekend plans goodbye. You're gonna have to carry a laptop around and make sure that you have reliable signal. I know plenty of other professions like doctors also involve having to be on call, so I'm not saying we're special snowflakes, but I'm just saying this is another downside to highlight. That being said, good engineering teams should recognize the negative impact that being frequently on call can have on morale. And so they will work with you to ensure that you get time off if you get woken up in the middle of the night. Working as a software developer can feel like being on this treadmill where you're just constantly trying to keep up with the latest language updates, new frameworks, technology, AI. When I took my first React course several years ago, I remember the material became outdated almost as soon as I finished my final project. In that course, we were building everything with class-based components, but if you've touched React at all recently, you would know that the new standard is functional components. I'm sure that other fields and other careers will also require you to continuously learn and keep up to date with new industry standards. That being said, I do think that web development in particular changes quite a bit faster than most other fields. And I do think that the constant barrage of new things that you have to keep up to date with and you have to learn can be overwhelming and too much for a lot of people. Just imagine you're a chef and every couple of years you have to learn how to use a new version of a knife, and your old knife is incompatible with your current version of a cutting board. It's an odd example, but you get what I mean. You have to continuously learn new syntax, new frameworks, etc. Personally, as a full stack developer, I would spend about an hour or two every single week learning new tools and framework updates and syntax just so I can remain relevant. With most tech jobs, you are unlikely to be coding 8 hours straight a day, so there's always time at the end of the week to learn new things, or your company, if you're lucky, will give you dedicated time once in a while to brush up on your skills. If you find the pressure to be constantly learning new things and self-educating to be overwhelming, then honestly, this might not be the right field for you. If you want to know how I personally learn new programming concepts without burning out and actually retaining that information, I did a video recently on how to learn programming efficiently, so I'm going to link that at the end, and I will see you over there. Bye-bye.